Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It's Dan, and I've got a return guest today. But before I introduce him, I just want to kind of set the table for today's show. So for those of you that follow me on the various social medias or watch this podcast on a regular basis, you know that I'm a former victim of domestic violence, and I ran a support group for male victims of domestic violence a little over 20 years ago, and was actively involved back then in trying to get a shelter open for men in New York State, because even to this day, there is no shelter in New York State that supports male victims of domestic violence. So it's a passion of mine, and it's something that I think is the prime reason that I do this show, so that I can raise awareness of the issue. And I believe that that issue leads to many of the other issues that men and boys face. So I wanted to have my friend Bill Corbitt back on. He was on a few months back. Hello, Bill.
Hey, how's it going, Dan?
It's going great. Bill and I have gotten to know each other. We talk almost every day, sometimes through text and stuff. But Bill also has a similar passion than I. The reason I wanted to have Bill on today is one of the things he's working on is getting a shelter open for men called Daddy's House. And we'll get into that. But before we do, Bill, why don't you tell us, the audience, a little bit about yourself, who you are, and why you do what you do?
Sure. Well, my background is in IT security, digital forensics, incident response. Was a former federal agent. Never thought I'd be here in a million years, to be honest with you. Wasn't on my career path or career goals. I went through a bad divorce, victim of domestic violence, domestic battery. And when I had a total belief in the legal system, the court system, I soon found out that it's very bigoted and very biased against men and fathers. Suffered through a silver bullet, came out of that okay. And as I got into doing research before, me and some veterans and some mothers formed our nonprofit, veteranfathers.com, we came to the basic overall conclusion, to put it very simply, men have nothing. We don't have any rights. I often call them privileges because they're often revoked in lieu of someone else's rights. We started taking a look at the basic overall legal structure in a very critical eye, and found case after case, thousands of cases of abuse of office from the judges, implicit bias, and we had to do something. So we formed Veteran Fathers. The official name is Foundation for the Parental Rights for Veteran Fathers. That way we keep the veteran status in place, but also to focus on fathers and children. With that, we have two main missions within Veteran Fathers, and that is to fight the courts, litigation, but also probably our biggest effort right now is what we call Daddy's House, which is a domestic violence shelter for fathers, men, and their children. Currently in the United States, there's 2,000 such shelters available for women and 2 for men. One is in Texas, the other one's in California. There's nothing east of the Mississippi. And when we started taking a look at Daddy's House, we realized that if a father is in need, like I was, I reached out for a domestic violence shelter. There wasn't one. I was told to get a hotel. There was no support, no help, nothing. Essentially, my country abandoned me. And when I started really looking through things, when a father calls for help, they're in desperate need. Men typically don't reach out for help. They think they can handle it themselves. So when someone reaches out for help, what do they ask for? In this instance, they can ask for Daddy's House. They can call a 911 line once we get the house up and running, and call a 911 line and talk to the operator and say, I need to talk to a representative from Daddy's House. And if we roll this out globally, that can be in place in every country on the planet. I mean, that's my ultimate dreams, but in every major city in every country on the globe is a daddy's house. They can just call up and say, I want to talk to a representative from daddy's house. They can plug us in directly. They'll know who we are. Like every domestic violence shelter, they'll have the list of shelters and numbers and contact information, and we can get them the help they need. We can get transportation service. If you check our website out, we partnered with a local nonprofit garage, GI Garage. We can get them vehicle maintenance and repairs done. And we'll offer essentially all the amenities any domestic violence shelter can offer. We can offer them moral support, counseling. We can give them, if the children are in school, we can get their kids educational support so they don't miss and they don't fall behind in school. We can get them the legal support they need as well. But right now, men don't have anything. There's nothing out there. And
That's a great point that you're making there, Bill, because, to your point about the shelters that exist now, and I'm coming from memory, so my numbers may not be exact, but I remember there was a study done a couple of years ago where they surveyed somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 odd shelters. And the number was somewhere around only 20% of them offered any type of help for men. And we're not talking beds, by the way. So when in the domestic violence industry, and I call it an industry on purpose, it really comes down to beds, right? That's where they get their funding from and all of that. Of those 2,000 you mentioned across the country, 2 offer beds, basically. Everybody else, and you even mentioned this, offers vouchers to local hotels, or more precisely, motels. You ain't staying at the Ritz-Carlton, my friend. You're staying, and I know this from absolute experience. I saw it. They're going to give you vouchers to the local Fleabag Motel. The shelter I worked with and affiliated with offered it to it was probably 15 odd room. I mean, just in the worst part of our area. And oh, by the way, that's where the pedophiles went when they came out of jail. That's the level. And I want to set that standard for the audience to understand what Bill's talking about here. That's what's available for men right now. And, let's kind of talk about the real need. You kind of alluded to it. There's this belief out there that there's not that many male victims. You know this and I know this. We hear it every day. Both of us do. But the reality is very different, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it's extremely different. I mean, if you just look at the research, you can do a simple Google search and bring up the research. I mean, IPV violence, just in IPV, intimate personal relationships, and the violence out of that, 70% are men, by and large.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's 70% are men, where are those 70% men? Where did they go? And that's what the problem is. They have nowhere to reach out to. They have nowhere to go. There's nothing. And when you're thinking about this intimate partner violence, you're talking about couples who typically have children. So if you're talking with someone and they're going, and I've had this conversation with feminists, is our shelter will also take in men. Okay, let's take it from that argument. And I've had this discussion with local feminists here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I have witnesses to this discussion in which I said, okay, how many men have you taken in over the last 10 years? Well, we've taken in several. Okay, can you release your documents to us? Now, understand a DV shelter can release those documents. They can't release the name of the person they come in, but they can release, we've had this many women, we've had this many men, and we've had children associated with this person that came into the shelter. They won't release them to me. And when I asked them to kind of give me, in the conversation, I'm asking them, well, how many men over the last 5 years? They can't give me a number. And that's exactly why. If you read their nonprofit bylaws, they are actually in direct violation of their bylaws, which I don't know why the IRS hasn't shut them down, because in their bylaws are very generic. They say, we're here to support victims of domestic violence. They don't specify gender. Okay. And our bylaws, we're very specific. Mm-hmm. We're here to support fathers and men, a very specific bylaw. Theirs are very general, which means the IRS should come in and say, that should be a 50-50 split. If it's not, we're going to pull your nonprofit status immediately. But the IRS doesn't. because they haven't been challenged. This can be a civil action challenge, but men are so scared. I mean, you do too, Dan. You've been in this longer than I have, but for me, coming into the market, I'm talking to men scared to death
Mm-hmm.
to even complain. They're so scared of the courts. They're so scared of our government. They're afraid to speak up. Now you're starting to see an evolution, and I've seen it since I've been involved, but an evolution has started to occur where men are getting sick of this treatment.
Yep.
And they're starting to speak up. Well, okay, you speak up. What's the next evolution? What's the next step? You're speaking up. Good. What's the next step? And this is the next step. We have to get them the help because they have nowhere to go. They don't know what to do. So
And if they do try and reach out for help, Bill, and you know this as well as I do, that fear that they have is a legitimate fear, right?
Because, it's totally legit.
You know, I remember when I went through it, you know, my personal experience is she laid me out. Cops showed up. Our neighbors actually called, and they were going to arrest me. I was the one knocked out, literally knocked out. And they were going to arrest me. And if it wasn't for my neighbor, God bless her, stepping in and going, no. He was the one that was attacked. I would have been arrested, right? So that is not uncommon. That's the norm, right? Police are trained under the Duth Model, so are judges, to assume the larger person is the more likely aggressor. And that whole Duth Model was created to silence male victims. And so that's been around for roughly 30 years. And, you know, when you look at that, and we all talk, men see what's going on. That fear of just that, if I call for help, I'm the one that's going to get arrested. Then you're talking about court, right? You go into court, we all know what happens in court. They're going to protect the woman at all costs. She can get a TRO with the 5 magic words. I am afraid of him. That's it. No evidence needed. And so that fear is legitimate. And then when you add on it, you know, having been in the system as, you know, a victim advocate, I literally saw what the shelters did to men. They tried to destroy them. And so that fear is out there, and it is absolutely legitimate. I don't ever fault a man for being afraid. He should be, to be honest with you.
Totally. And this is something I'm trying to do too with some of my posts. Put in the hashtag Inquisitor Workshop, is to educate the young men out there, the young kings. Hey, you're not immune. You think because you're not in a personal relationship or you're not in a marriage, you're going to be immune from the silver bullet. You need to get a clue on life. Parents, you need to teach your kids this. Your kids are directly exposed to the silver bullet tactic, which is a false allegation, whether it's a false allegation of assault or sexual assault, and it will destroy their life. And here's how it works. Let's say that you fight them in court. You spend tens of hundreds of $1,000s and you win the case and you get the records expunged. When you enter business world or you enter the military, you go into what's called a certain aspect of criminal background and checks and investigations, in which they do a detailed criminal background check, which means they look at court records. You can't expunge a court record.
Right.
They will then look at that and they will see where you have been, where that claim has now been administered to a court record, and he will never be an executive. They'd never.
Yeah, I actually illustrated that with someone I had on the podcast last spring. His name was Jason. Was arrested, completely exonerated. I mean, there's literally absolutely no proof that he did anything. In fact, the proof is the exact opposite. Yet the first thing that happens when you Google him is that arrest record comes up, because it's a public record, and it cannot be done away with.
Nope.
And nowhere in that Google list does it show he was innocent.
Exactly.
If you do an in-depth search, you'll find it, right? And I illustrated that, and I can't tell you the number of people, Bill, I've had come to me going, how can that be, right? And guys, and I'm like, that's the reality, and that's what we're facing, and that's what creates that fear of reaching out for help when you're getting abused on a daily basis. One thing that I think the general public doesn't understand is when you look at it as what is the victim going through, the difference for men and women, there isn't one. right?
No,
As far as what they're experiencing, it's exactly the same. Are there nuances? Sure, I'll grant that. I mean, is the risk of a male getting seriously hurt less than that of a woman? Absolutely there is. And that's just a matter of size. But that doesn't change a damn thing. I hate that argument that they'll use is, well, men hurt more than women do when they inflict it. Okay, so what when it comes to helping a victim, right?
yeah,
That
the
that
victim's a victim.
a victim's a victim, exactly. And that's again, it speaks to that fear, and I don't think people really understand that, and really how truly prevalent this is. You look at, say, the CDC numbers, and these numbers are. Let's understand, people, that what Bill's talking about with that fear, these cases don't get reported, so the stats you see out there are all completely bogus. But even if you take that out of the equation and just go with the stats they give you, it's somewhere around 25, 26% of all men, this is what they're reporting, will experience IPV in their lifetime. So
Absolutely.
even if you just use that number, which is a bogus number, but if you just went with that, that's 1 in 4 men. Yet there's 2 shelters in a nation of 350 million. Explain that one to me.
Yeah, the only way you can explain that, and here's where I take a hard line, is it's abuse. It's straight out
It's
abuse.
planned abuse.
It's planned
It's
abuse. You
systemic.
can't, in this discussion, you can't have both sides of a table. You got to pick a side. And if you can't pick a side, I'll assign it to you. I've said that often. And that is the only reason why men don't have access to this amount, the same amount of expertise and assistance is abuse. And anybody that says, oh, wait a minute, that's not the case, blah, 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 I don't care what they say. Listen to what they're saying, and what you'll hear is abuse. Every abuser has to maintain a victim.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, they will find somebody else. And the only reason why men don't have this is they have to maintain men as victims. That's the only reason. That's the only logical reason. If you look at it from the standpoint of, well, through the years, women have gotten over 50 years, they've gotten over hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm like, okay, let's even the playing field. That's all we're asking for. Let's even the playing field.
Key point there.
You now have a nonprofit. We're official. It's already registered with IRS. We've had law firms look at us and say, yep, they're totally legit. They got a great practice. They've got excellent bylaws. They've got the proper leadership model in place. Give us $500 million. Let us put it to work to help men and children. But they won't. So what do they want to do? They want to maintain children as victims. That's the only eventual outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what slant, what type of abusive syntax you can wrap around that. You're abusing children. That's exactly what it boils down to.
I couldn't agree more with you.
So take the man and the woman out of the picture. Just take them out of the picture for a quick discussion. What are you left with? A child. So why is our government intentionally abusive towards children? It's because abusers must maintain the victim. And that means as time goes forward, that child is going to enter into the same system that still isn't fixed. And they're back at square one.
And just to support what Bill's saying and give you the proof, look where we are now. We're now in the third generation, essentially. Domestic violence shelters essentially came around about in the 70s. There was some prior, but as we know them now, they started in the 70s. Aaron Pizzi's being the one who started the first one, who I'm hoping to have on as a guest, by the way. When you look at that and how she initially tried to set it up, it was gender neutral, without question. They ultimately tossed her aside. I'm trying to be nice about what they did to her. It was horrific. Go read her book.
Yeah.
And they took what is a legitimate social issue, something that needs to be addressed, that hurts women, men, and to Bill's point, their children. This was in the 70s, and they made it a political one. And now we are sitting essentially 3 generations later. And my argument has been, and will be, that much of what we're seeing going on in society today is a direct result of that.
Yeah.
You talk about the women's movement. Yes, that has had an effect. I don't dispute that. But I argue, and this is why I'm so passionate about it, that the domestic violence became the shelters and funding and all that became the weapon that they created.
It's definitely weaponized. I mean, Aaron Prizzi says it's generational.
Absolutely, it is.
And it's absolutely generational. I mean, she did a tremendous amount of work, not only in setting up the shelter, but she did research. She was trying to figure out the causation, which is what I always say is go back to the root. Find the root. If you find the root, you find the problem, but you have to keep digging for the root. And she said it's generational. Well, I don't have any generational abuse in my background, but my ex-wife does.
Right.
So therefore, she knew what she could do and get away with. Like I've got evidence, and eventually I'll post it in one of my videos, of being assaulted in the house in front of my child running. I ran out of the house, locked myself in my truck, and she's literally trying to break the window of my truck to get in and stab me.
Mm.
But yet when you look at her, and here's where, and I'm not going to get off topic, but I'll say this real quick. She's been professionally diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. When you look at that type of disorder, cluster B personality types, that specific cluster B personality type has what's called a rage event.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where it's abusive. The courts don't recognize that. The courts won't take a look at that and go, wait a minute, you got this big, huge, muscular guy, portrayed as a trained killer. He's a small arms weapons expert, a martial artist. He could have defended himself. But what they fail to say is as soon as you lay a hand on her, even in defense, you go to prison.
Right.
That's what, and you've seen the same responses in some of your feeds. I've read them. Mm-hmm. I've had them in mine where you get this crazy dude saying, well, no woman's going to lay a hand on me. Really? What are you going to do? Fight back? Go ahead, Bucker. Go ahead, Buckaroo Banzai. Fight back. Watch what happens. And don't call me from prison, because that's where you're going.
And it's exactly what they do, Bill, right? I can't tell you the number of guys I've had reach out to me going, I grabbed her wrists and now I'm serving however many months or years, right? And that's the reality. And, this is what I want people to understand, is that this is the actual reality. Forget what you read in the media. The media is going to misrepresent the whole thing. We talk about the stats, for example.
Oh, yeah.
My cases do not show up in the stats at all. Nowhere. They didn't take a report. When they found out it was her that committed against me, the police immediately did away. You just need to leave the house, sir. Leave the kids with her, by the way.
Yep.
So
I called an attorney. I mean, I was in tears. I hid in the back of my walk-in closet so she couldn't hear the call. I called an attorney, literally destroyed, in tears, asking him what I should do. And I didn't know this. He said, you need to get out of there. She's setting you up for a DV.
Yep.
And I went, what the hell's a DV? I didn't know what it was. Remember, my background as a federal agent is civil and criminal. And he goes, it's domestic violence, Bill. If she sets you up for a DV, you'll never see your daughter ever again. And I was like, oh my God. Mm-hmm. And then I started connecting dots and I went, holy shit, this is all planned. And then I found out multiple affairs. I found out other shit she was doing. And I was like, what in the hell did I marry? And this really gets my goat. And I'm gonna complain a little bit and get off topic. We'll get back on it. Is people go, well, you should have married better. You should have.
Oh, I hate when they say that. Oh my God.
I'm like, okay, all right, little Miss or Mr. Expert. Let me explain to you something about narcissistic personality disorder. They're master deceivers, master manipulators. They discover what your dreams and aspirations are, and they'll use those against you until they get what they want and they're out. What she wanted was a child and child support and alimony, and she's out. Boom. You're left holding the bag, destroyed the man. And that's where a lot of people come out and they say shit like that. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Know-It-All, Mrs. Know-It-All. Go ahead and say something like that, because you're going to run into one. And then we're going to have this conversation again, and you're going to say, I never knew.
And what's interesting, because one of the issues that we have trying to get men help is getting funding for it. And I've met with at this point hundreds of politicians of various levels, including local, state, federal, and they have that mindset that you're talking about. Well, it's a small problem, first of all. I've never experienced it. And then my favorite thing is, well, let's have a conversation about that. And I'll pull out my list of 10 things that, has your wife ever told you you're not allowed to do whatever? Well, yeah, you're a victim of domestic violence. What?
Oh
It's
yeah.
these politicians are of that it's not me mindset, so it doesn't happen to anyone. And you see that within even the shelter system. I ran into some women there who were genuinely wanted to help victims, all victims. But they couldn't see past that mindset that is now generational where, well, men are only perpetrators, right? And they weren't. I want to be clear on this. They weren't like the typical feminist hate men, or they weren't like that. They genuinely, when I sat them down and I talked to them about my personal experience and that of dozens of guys in my groups and hundreds and, well, at this point, thousands of guys that I've talked to, the looks on their face, Bill, they're just literally stunned because they're like, and I explain how men feel and they're like, well, that's me. And I'm like, yes, it's getting people to understand that, the CDC, off the top of my head, I think it's 1.4 million is the number they have on their website, male victims per year. That's a fraction of the actual number, first of all.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
again, going back to what we said, even if you disregard that it's only a fraction, that's 1.4 million men, two shelters.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy. I mean, when you sit down and you just do basic math, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. When you do just basic math and look at money and numbers and equate those money and numbers based on simple demographics, men are so amazingly underrepresented and undersupported. It's actually criminal. I'm a firm believer
Oh,
in
I
that.
agree with you on that. I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. It's it was planned 50 years ago, give or take. This is the road we're going to take. As I said, it became feminism's weapon
Hmm.
to disparage men. To You got to remember with these shelters, they see it as a zero sum game. They want all the money. They use that money to lobby with. They use that money. It goes, they'll support a politician that is going to support them. It's all part of the game, right? So for the politicians, and I'm going to catch flack, I know, but I don't care. The politicians are using domestic violence shelters as slush funds for their campaign. I'll funnel 3 million. Planned Parenthood's another one, by the way. Go look at how much Planned Parenthood gets from the government, and then go look at how much they donate back to politicians.
Oh
Oops,
yeah. Oh
oops.
yeah. Oh yeah,
So
when you go through all the finances, and this is something we have on our roadmap, probably about 5 or 6 year point, is we're going to go through all the finances of all these nonprofits that make claims, outlandish, unsupported claims that they support men, and we're going to prove they don't, and we're going to go after them financially. There's no way they're going to survive it
mhm,
because the data is already there, and they have to give it to us by law. And
right.
the fact that IRS hasn't already gone in and ravaged them and fined them, removed their nonprofit status is emblematic of the criminal activity. Now, when you look at a man's domestic violence shelter focused towards men and fathers, and there's single men as well as fathers with children, you're looking at a shelter that's organized and set up to handle the needs of men. Okay. And everybody knows, and it's starting to come out now in the mental health community, you can't counsel a man who's gone through abuse the same way you counseled a woman, even though that's the way they've been trained.
Right.
So in our DV shelters, we're going to screen these counselors to make sure they understand you're dealing with fathers and men and their children. You can't bring in the architecture you've learned on how to counsel women that has gone through DV and bring it into this architecture of men. It doesn't go. I mean, the research is very definitive on that now, and the mental health community slowly is starting to realize this, and they're starting to put in corrective action with their counselors and saying, you can't take this that you were taught on how to counsel women and bring that over to a man, it doesn't match. You have to focus on the fact he's a man and what he's gone into. And a lot of times men get so emotionally destroyed, and I was one of them. I'll admit to it. I've said this often. You get the third element of fear, and that's freeze.
Mm-hmm.
You you
Absolutely.
you don't know what to do. You don't want to do anything. You don't even want to get out of bed. And that's what men need a domestic violence shelter for, is to come in. We'll work them through the freeze. We'll work them through the legal needs that they need to go through. We'll walk them through the process. And it needs to be done. We'll hold their hand and say, this is what you need to do. These are what is good for the children. This is what's good for you. But that isn't out there. Men have nothing. We're abandoned.
To your point, Bill, I'm going to share a little bit about when I ran a domestic violence group for men. So I am not a psychologist. I don't even plan to portray one on TV, as I say. But I was a peer counselor, right? I had training, but because I was a victim, I was counseling people as a victim, not as a trained mental health professional. We had them available. And now, mind you, this is the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And those professionals, a couple of times they would come into my groups and just sit there to observe. And, one was a female. And I will tell you, the group shut down. I mean, one of the worst meetings I ever had. Nobody was willing to talk. And I said to her afterward, I said, did you see what happened? Yeah, nobody was talking, and she was trying to criticize me. And I'm like, it's because you're in the room. And I said, you all talk about how you don't want men around female victims. You have to isolate the females. How's that any different than what you observed there? And I could see the radar and the light bulb going off. But to your other point, when I ran that group, again, I had mental health professionals that were assisting and observing and all that, because that's what was required. And they would criticize the way I was doing it because I ran it as men need. As, men, the way I always explain it to people, and I know you'll agree with this, is men do not speak face to face. We speak shoulder to shoulder.
Yes.
Right. So I would say to someone who's first time coming in, I would say, come in about 15 minutes earlier. I'll meet with you individually. And first thing I would tell them is, look, all I want you to do in this first meeting is sit and listen. I'm not going to put you on the spot. If at any point you want to speak up, raise your hand and I will let you. Right. I said, all I want you to do is sit and listen to the other guys. And the reason I did that was to the points you're making, which is most guys isolate themselves and they think it's just them. And this allowed them to hear guys tell horrific stories that were as horrific as theirs, worse, better, whatever, but they could see that they weren't alone. And my meetings ran on average 90 minutes. Sometimes we'd go to 2 hours. But towards the end, I would, do you want to say anything? And if they didn't, that was fine. But almost overwhelmingly, they did at that point because they felt comfortable. Now, contrast that with the norm. So the few shelters that might have some sort of service for men, they treat it like they would helping a female victim. And it will not work with men.
Nope.
It's like I talked to my local shelter about 2 months ago. I said, I'll let you know who I am. And I was very polite, or as polite as I could be. I said, I went through your website because they claim they help men. I said, your website completely turns male victims off. And I gave her point by point on every page on their website. 2 months, she said, well, we'll look into it. 2 months later, nothing's changed, right? Again, it's not just couching men as the perpetrator. It's the verbiage behind it. It's all men and women think completely different. We emote completely different. And that's one of the biggest issues and why I say there needs to be separate shelter services for men than women, because the approach has to be different.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, I've had men who are victims of domestic violence who have also tried shelters, and one in particular was closely integrated in with the shelter built in Canada. And their comment to me was very precise. And that was the shelter in Canada has become deeply corrupted by the feminist movement. Men don't even want to go there anymore. And their comment to me and advice to me was don't let this become corrupted. Now, my personal promise to everybody is I'll work my damnedest to make sure it doesn't get corrupted. Doesn't mean it won't be. It means I'll be working to prevent that. Even the ladies that are involved in helping us out with this 501, they've gone through so much screening and they're watched all the time because the specter of doubt is always there, that they could be feminist associated or be a hidden feminist or actually be working against men. But everything that I've seen, even with the ladies assisting us in this nonprofit, they're 1,000% in support of helping men, mainly because a lot of them have young men as children and they don't want them running into this. One lady in particular, their son went to school and he was learning about the laws and rape and everything else and how it's applied to women. And he asked his mom, men can't be raped? I don't understand that. Why can't men be raped? Now they're telling children this. They're telling children this, and they're telling children only women can be raped. And he said, Mom, I don't understand that. That doesn't make any sense. And she said, that's exactly what we're fighting for with the nonprofit, is anybody can be raped. And he come to an epiphany, and he said, then these laws are wrong. They're illegal, Mom. And he's 12.
I was going to say, how old? I was going to ask you, how old is he? Very prescient young man.
And that's where logic comes in, is when you look at things logically, take emotion out of the picture, look at things logically, is how can you look at another human being and say, you need to remain a victim? The only people saying that are abusers, even politicians. For a politician to say in any construct that there shouldn't be more domestic violence shelters for men than women, for any politician to even say veteran fathers who's looking to roll this out nationally shouldn't get, and just my personal opinion, $500 million dedicated to them from Congress so they can start doing this and getting things fixed in this country, start fixing families and children, is an abuser. Because when you look at it logically, there's no logical reason at all that every single politician on any ballot, in any office, political office, from the lowest to the executive office, the president of the United States, shouldn't sit there and go, oh my God, we've forgotten about men. We've forgotten about veterans. We have got to play catch-up ball, and we've got to play it fast, and it has to take place. Who's out there situated to do this? There's only one, veteran fathers. We're the only one. But if you look at how much money's come in, only from private donations.
Yeah, and that's the issue. You know, I've talked about it before, and I know you're aware of this, but I tried to get a shelter open, not just me personally. We had a group, much like yours, where we were trying to get a shelter open in upstate New York, 2003 area. And we had someone that was willing to donate a property to us. It was in rough shape, to be sure. We had a contractor that was willing to do the work that was needed for free. We had everything lined up. What we didn't have was the funding for materials. We only wanted $100,000 from the government. That's all I asked for. Give me $100,000. You're talking about New York State's budget's $30 billion. I asked for that's not even pocket change, right?
Wouldn't even show up on their
nothing. Met with both parties, multiple representatives, state senators, state assembly, men and women. They all kind of agreed there's a need, because if they didn't, I would straighten their ass out. But they all acknowledged there's a need, but very, very few of them would publicly come out and say so. They're so afraid of the women's groups. Very, very few of them were trying to help us. There was a couple that was trying their best to get it in the budget. Bottom line is we got nothing, right? It's that zero. I always say it's the zero-sum mentality that is at work, and I hate to give credit where credit's due, but I'm going to. The feminists are masters at keeping that in place. If you spend $1 on a man shelter, somehow you're taking away from the women's shelter, even though, and you said this earlier, there is not a single advocate for men's shelter that I've ever met that said we should take 1 penny away from the women's shelters.
Yeah, and that's where there's so much misinformation out there, and it's obviously, and I'm going to sound like conspiracy theorists, it's actually a psyop, and that's because you can't budget wise, you can't take one away from the other unless the other one knows about it and it's approved on the budget, and that's not what we're asking for. We're not asking for anything to be taken away from the women. Not at all. They worked hard for that and they deserve it, and they're violent about it. So let them keep what they got. But what we're saying is, men deserve better, and men deserve this. Now, what's interesting is exactly what you brought up, and I've said this often. There's only two ways governments change: violent protests and costly litigation. That's the only way two governments change. Look at your history. Mm-hmm. And what men refuse to do is they're scared to protest. They're scared to death. And here's what, and you hear this as well. Well, I don't want to be put to jail, lose custody of my kids. Mm-hmm. I don't want this. I don't want that. Well, women did it. They didn't lose custody of their children. Well, that's not how laws are administered. All legitimate arguments. I'm not saying these are not legitimate arguments. I'm saying they are legitimate arguments, but it gives you a flavor of the abuse from the courts and the government to control what? Victims. That's
right,
it.
Right.
That means you're in abuse architecture. That means they have to maintain men as victims. Why? Because that's what abusers need. Now, here's the sad part, and we're starting to pull together some preliminary research on this. It's very sketchy, but I've already made my decision. Once men have guaranteed protections under existing legislation that's immediately enforceable, and I say this a lot, guess who's going to be the next victim? Children. Children. Because abusers need victims. They need them. They have to feed off them. It's a mental depravity. And once men have guaranteed protections under existing legislation that's immediately enforceable, we're taken off the victim table. The only thing left is children.
SRDH, S being shit, rolls downhill.
That's it.
And it's funny.
Using children.
To Bill's point on this, if you go look at what happens in divorced families, if you actually look into, is the male the one that was being abused by the female, and he's now removed from the situation, it's not a certainty, but it's damn close to it that the children
every single time. That's exactly where I was going with this. People keep looking at me like I'm crazy, and
but
saying,
it's true.
Well, they wouldn't abuse children. I'll be damned. Look at the research that's out there. They either beat the child or they kill the child.
And
that happens almost 100% of the time.
Exactly. And no one knows about it.
When I tell men, and I tell them, I was like, look, you better fight, because if you don't, your kid's going to suffer. Yep. And they sit there and look at me like I'm crazy, like I got a third eyeball on my forehead. Yep. I do. Yep. It sees the future. You're not looking at the future. You have to understand that if men don't fight, if we refuse to fight because we're scared, guess who's going to suffer? Our kids. They're either going to get mentally, emotionally, or physically abused, if not slaughtered. And I'm sorry I get passionate about this, and I'm sorry I'm on my high box about this, but men, you need to realize women aren't going to fight for you, or very few of them will. This is our fight. And guess who holds political office? Guess who holds corporate office? Guess who holds the key layers of industry? Men. And guess why they're not doing anything? Because they want you to remain as a victim. That's the only reason.
Yeah, they.
It's the only reason.
I don't want to go too political with this, but one of the things that you're talking about is the politicalization of domestic violence, for a lot of different reasons. But one of it is to keep men down, right? It's to further that agenda for women. It's a funding source for all of it.
Aaron Prizzi put it in perfect terms. He said she's a firm believer this is male genocide.
Absolutely.
When I first heard this, I was like, it's a little extreme. Let me take this out of the puzzle. But I'll be honest with you. And remember, I went into that her statement of saying this is male genocide very skeptical. Okay, I got to agree with her. There's no other reason for it. There's no other reason. And look, and for you black kings out there, pay attention to me. it impacts you the hardest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You the hardest. So if you look at it as though this is a white dude talking about white genocide, bro, y'all need to sit back and take a drink of scotch or something, get you some lean, because they're looking to get you.
More.
It isn't about men, white guys, and it damn sure ain't about Asians. They're targeting you.
And they have for 5 decades now. It's funny because, I've talked many times with black men about the situation. It doesn't. It's somewhat, if you go look at the data and statistics, you can, if you dig deep enough, you can see it. But
it's clear as a bell.
They are by far the most abused.
Oh my God. And there's somebody said this to me a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to share it. Sorry to interrupt, but they said, we love veterans and veteran fathers. And I said, why? What makes us unique? And they said, military people and veterans don't see race.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see color. We're trained that way. I mean, I grew up a military brat. I never understood racism. The only time I run into racism was when I visited family in Connecticut. I couldn't understand why they were behaving that way. I never saw racism in the South, because the South is extremely sensitive towards racism. We want to avoid that at all costs. And when I realized what he was saying is, it's not black veteran fathers, it's not white veteran fathers, it's not Asian veteran fathers or Indian or Canadian. It's veteran fathers. We don't see race here. And I absolutely forbid it. Mm-hmm. And if I find it, boy, you see my monster come out, you'll find it. Because I never really experienced it. I've experienced racism against me through the promotion architectures, but that's my own battle. But I refuse to tolerate that here. It doesn't exist here.
Yeah, the amount of abuse that black males are, I'm talking IPV. We're not talking. We're not talking out in the quote unquote real world. We're talking within families. The amount of abuse that they take, both as spouses and children. My opinion, it's the biggest crime going because it is hidden. Nobody wants to talk about it. And the fact that we're talking about it, right? Somebody will come after us for it. I already know it.
Oh, definitely. They'll say something about two white guys talking
two
about
two old white guys talking about a black issue.
Well, it's going to happen.
I know it is.
But you know what? Guess what leaders do?
That's what we do.
About difficult topics.
We're going to bring it out because it needs to be brought out.
Guess what? We're going to pop that zit and get that infection out. If it takes two white OGs to do it, then guess what?
I will stand on that soapbox 100 times out of 100.
We just pop that zit and get that infection out because it needs to be talked about. And guess what? The black community needs to realize this is, Aaron Prizzi said it's male genocide. Sorry, I look at the stats. I look at numbers, facts, data, and evidence. Mm-hmm. And they're looking to commit black male genocide. I'm totally convinced of that.
And they're using domestic violence shelters
to
absolutely. Do it with. It's absolutely. To give just to step back for 1 second. I want to explain to someone who maybe is listening to this and really doesn't get it. So let me just kind of step you back for a moment. So when a male is abused and goes to a shelter for help, the odds are, first of all, he's going to get turned away. All right. But let's assume the shelter decides to go through the motions. The shelter I was affiliated with was one of those, we're going to go through the motions one. All right, come on in. Right. They're going to shuttle him off to a separate private audience or office. All right. They're going to separate him from the women because, he's a threat. And they're going to make it clear to him they view him as a threat. Let's say, okay, he gets to that point. He starts saying, I've been abused. He gives evidence, whatever. They're going to question him. And they're going to assume he is the perpetrator. And that questioning, I've listened to it. And trying not to lose it here. It's not nice, okay? But let's even say they get past that point, which is rare. And they say, all right, I'm going to take a report. They will take a report. What the part they're not going to tell you is the minute he leaves, he might get his 3 days. And by the way, the vouchers you get are usually 3 days. They'll keep women in a bed shelter for weeks, months,
Months.
but 3 days at max for a guy, right? They'll take that, and I saw it. I can't tell you how many times, Bill. They take that report, it goes right in the trash because they know if they take that report and they have to include it in their statistics, it's going to immediately show that the paradigm they've created, which is only women are victims, is going to get blown up. That's why they love to throw stats at me, and I destroy their stats every single time. No stat on domestic violence at this point do I consider valid. There are fresher studies coming out, and what they're showing is what you talked about. When it comes to non-mutual domestic violence, which, by the way, is the predominant thing. It's usually both parties doing it to each other. When you take those out of the case, about 7 out of 10 cases, the woman is abusing the man.
Absolutely.
And nobody wants to talk about that. Most of all, the politicians.
See, here's something that they don't want to talk about as far as generational abuse is they won't let that come into court. But also, too, when you take a look at abuse in front of a child, that's actually by law. It's been codified under law that is actually child abuse. So if the woman is abusing the man in front of a child, that woman should have been arrested for child abuse. It's codified under law. I've stated that several times, but that's never done. It's actually pushed aside and brushed over.
Oh, it's hidden.
But if a man does it, oh, he's going to prison.
Page 1 on the report if he does it, right? So I get into it with social workers too. And by the way, they have a horrific job. I could never be a social worker. They do some amazing work. They also do some very bad work, right? The majority of them are trying to do their best. I believe that. But
when I had to call the social worker based on some evidence I'd received, you know what she said? She said, "Why didn't you call?" Because someone called, and I still haven't found out who did, because I posted the evidence on my Instagram feed because I was looking for help. But I knew, and I've been told by attorneys, don't you call because you'll be considered a vengeful father.
Yep.
And I posted on my Instagram feeds, and I said, I just threw it up to God. I'm like, here you go, deal with it. Somebody called DFACS. And when DFACS called me to interview me, they said, "Why didn't you call?" And I told them that. I said, "I've been advised by legal counsel that you'll see me as a vengeful father." And you know what they said? "You're right."
Yep. I was going to say I could have answered that before you even said it. Yep.
And I thought to myself, are you fucking kidding me?
Yep.
They're trained that way. That's the only reason they would have drawn that conclusion. Now, this is digital forensic evidence. It's out on social media, so they can't refute it. But yet that social worker told me without a pause, "You're right." That's an abuse architecture. That's intentional abuse and unlawful. And that DFACS needs to be sued into abject poverty over it.
Yeah, I'm actually shocked that they admitted it, Bill, because it goes back to, and I mentioned it earlier, it all goes back to the Duth Model. The Duth Model.
Every bit of it. You can go to the Duth Model website and read it. It's extremely sexist.
Oh my God. If you go in and actually study it, and I have, I've spent many hours studying it and all that. It's been completely debunked and disproved.
100%.
But it's still in use, right? So for those that don't know, the Duth Model came out in the 90s. And the presumption initially that it put out was that only women can be victims, only men can be perpetrators. That changed because it started making its way through the courts, politics, all that got involved. So suddenly it went gender neutral. But they changed the verbiage, they didn't change the belief. And every police officer from the 1990s through now, every family court judge, most judges at all levels, attorneys, all of them are trained under that Duth Model, social workers. That model is what creates the issue we have because it doesn't allow for male victims. And
here's what's interesting. That, and I know we both have international audience, that, according to U.S. law, is what's called implicit bias.
Mm-hmm.
That's a felony. In other words, these judges, attorneys, and officers of the court are knowingly and with malice aforethought committing a felony.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's really disgusting. But when you sit back and you go, well, wait a minute, they're saying this is an abuse model. They're really making some outlandish comments. No, it's based on facts, data, and evidence. Like I said, I didn't want to be here. I still don't want to be here,
Right.
but I have to be here because somebody has to do something. And I'm strong enough to do it. You're strong enough to do
Mm-hmm.
this.
Yeah, I mean, I could go retire and sit on the beach every day, but
Sure.
I cannot, in good conscience, not speak up, and not fight for the younger guys, fight for all men, and by the way, women, okay, because you talk about generational. When you leave, when the man is distracted from the house and mom is raising the kids, and let's say there's a daughter in there, daughter's going to follow mom's lead. That's what we talk about with generational, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's where, again, the social workers don't see this, don't recognize it, don't address it. The courts certainly don't. And that's why you and I do what I do, or what we do, because we're trying to raise awareness. I've been at this well over 20 years. Are things better now? Yes, they are. The biggest change being men are finally opening up a little bit. You kind of alluded to that earlier. But the reality, we got a long way to go. And the first step is, I've made this argument many times. There are 2 shelters. We need one more, and then another, and then another, right?
I think we need about 4,000, to be honest with you. I mean,
I don't disagree with you, Bill. I'd be happy right now. My mission would be to get 1 in each state.
oh,
That would be, it's a drop in the bucket. I'll be the first to say that. I freely admit it. But it becomes proof of concept, right?
and that's where we were discussing earlier is let Daddy's House be the proof of concept.
Right.
Let it be proof of concept. It's a good name. Everybody remembers.
I love the
it.
name.
And why Daddy's House? You go to Daddy's house for safety and security and help. Where do you go when you need help? I don't know. Let's go to Daddy's house. That name in itself can be trademarked across the globe. There's no reason for it not to be.
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 domestic violence shelters, I had to research to find out what they are. And even then, as of right now, I know the state they're in. I don't know what city they're in. But like you were saying, why can't we have a DV shelter in every capital city in the United States and 4 U.S. territories?
Just give us that. That's all. I've said this to politicians at the federal level, senators, congresspeople, and their aides. You talk about 500 million. I said 5 million. Give me 5 million. I'll get a shelter in the capital of every state. And then we're going to prove to you just how bad things are. And so 5 million is, again, pocket change. We can give hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine.
Yes.
We can't give 5 million to help male victims.
Yeah, that gets my blood.
I mean, again, think what you want about Ukraine or Israel or any of them. Whatever. Any foreign aid we give, whatever it is, it may be the best thing in the world. All we're saying is I said 5 million. You want 500? 500 is still a drop in the bucket compared to the federal budget, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, only thing we're saying is invest in America. Invest
yes.
That's all we're saying.
Protect the people that voted for you.
Yeah, stop investing in foreign countries that want to kill us. Quit it. Okay? Start investing in your own people. That's our tax dollars. Put that back in your country. And all we're saying is, okay, we got a $5 million model we're trying to roll out here in Atlanta. Why 5 million? One is we've done the math. We figured out if we do raw property, fresh build, when I have to staff it, I have to look at maintaining that facility. I got to go through all the legal agreements, all the accreditations. I got to bring in the right people, and people don't work for free. I wouldn't. Okay. Even though I am right now. But when you look at putting one of those together, it's going to be here in Atlanta. The world's largest airport is here.
Mm-hmm.
I now can take people that fly in to the shelter. They can be in Alaska and say, I got to get a flight to Atlanta because I know Daddy's house is there and I know they can help. I've got the world's largest airport right here in Atlanta, Georgia. There's no reason why Daddy's house here in Atlanta, Georgia can't at least have at least 6 beds. to run 6 beds, fully staffed, food, shelter, medical care, educational assistance, mental health counseling, legal assistance. It's going to be expensive for 6 beds. And then to maintain that over a period of 5 to 15, maybe 20 years, it's going to be expensive. But to
Hmm.
know we have the world's largest daddy's house right here in Atlanta. I have the world's largest airport right here at Access. They can fly in. I can get a car down there to pick them up. And here's why daddy's house is needed. And you touched on this earlier. If they go to a flea bag hotel, they're not safe.
No,
That,
God, no,
that,
no.
that abuser can hunt them down, can stalk them and assault them, maybe even kidnap and kill the kids. But at daddy's house, I don't care if I have to build 12-foot high walls with concertina wire and automated gun turrets. That family, those children, and those men will be protected and safe. And when a child is safe, they learn better, they adjust better, they get their mental awareness back together, and they realize they can relax.
Bill, you're touching on a point, and we've touched on it a few times, the children. So one of the other things you'll often hear from the domestic shelters that are run by women feminists is that they help women and children. And I'll grant they do, right? You know, but go the opposite way. Did you know, I know you know this, but the average person listening in, did you know that if a mother who's being legitimately abused by her husband goes to a female domestic violence shelter, which is what 2,000 of them in the country, and her son happens to be 13 or 14 years old, they will not help her.
Nope.
They will tell her, sorry, you have a 13-year-old son. The son's completely innocent, has done nothing wrong. It's only because he's male. 13-year-old daughter, come on in. But if he's a male, no. Because, again, it goes against that paradigm they're trying to create. So to talk about daddy's house, you're not going to say to a father who comes in with, let's say, a son and a daughter, oh, your son can come in, but not your daughter. I mean,
No.
think about the lunacy of that kind of mindset.
See, and that's what's so important is it's obvious and it's well known and well published. There's an intentional movement within government factions to destroy the family architecture.
Oh, without question.
And there's extensive amount of research and studies out there that said a male-led household, the children turn out better. That's extensive, exhaustive research on that. So if we look to destroy that family architecture, even though it's a father and children, we're looking to destroy the child, and that's not what we're here to do. We're here to make children and men better. We're here to make sure that whenever a father shows up and he's got an infant child or he's got teenagers in tow, they've got a safe house they can come to and relax. They've got beds to sleep in, clothes to wear, food to eat, an educational system that will stop in and support them. If they need religious a foundation, they can reach out to. I've already talked to the Mormon Church. I've already talked to the Catholic Church. I'm going to be talking to synagogues. I'm going to be talking to. I'm going to talk to everybody. I've got neighbors. In fact, all my neighbors are Hindu. I'm going to be talking to them. So it doesn't matter what religion they are. It doesn't matter what color they are, where they're from. We're going to have that support available to them. Why? Because Atlanta is a culturally rich mecca of brilliant, helpful, beautiful people. And we have the world's largest airport. There's no reason why I can't have a shelter that can shelter at least 100 fathers and their children. It's unacceptable. I have mansions downtown Atlanta that are vacant, empty, collecting dust.
Yeah,
Give me one. Give me one of those mansions,
it goes
and
back
I
to
will renovate it.
Yeah.
And I will be able to shelter 40 to 50 fathers and their children in there.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were trying to do. The location we had was in Albany, New York.
Yeah.
It was downtown Albany, New York. It was a rundown old house, but we could have legitimately had 10 beds, right? And again, we were going to get the property. It was all going to be, all the work to get it fixed was going to be donated and all that. But where I want to kind of switch gears slightly, because you're talking about daddy's house and what you're trying to do, is let's talk about the finances a little bit more in depth, because I want people to really understand why they need to help this out, right? Because there's this belief out there, and I've run into it, that, oh, you're going to get volunteers, you're going to get all that. That's true. There will be volunteers. But you've got to have your base staff. You've got to have the location. Even if it's donated, hello, you might have to pay taxes. And hey, if you've been enjoying the show, can I ask a quick favor? You can help me to raise awareness on the issues men and boys face in today's society and even get them the help they need to overcome those issues. How? By simply hitting the like button. It'll only take a second of your time and costs you absolutely nothing, but it goes a long way towards ensuring this video is seen by even more people, which helps to raise the awareness that's so desperately needed. Thanks, and now back to the show.
That's absolutely correct, Dan. If you take a look at just your house, okay, if you take a look at what you're paying for your house, your taxes, your mortgage, your utilities, your food, basic overall maintenance of your house, you multiply that by 100, you have daddy's house. Mm-hmm. Now you amortize that out over a 10-year period, you now have the cost impact. So yes, there's going to be volunteers. Yes, we'll probably have building contractors show up and be able to contribute some labor and some materials towards the home. But you have ongoing maintenance costs that have to now be calculated into the overall cost of the domestic violence shelter. And they're ongoing costs. You can't preserve food up for 10 years and then pull it out of a freezer and expect to use it. The reason why is the health department shows up and investigates the legitimacy of you serving food to other people in a domestic violence shelter. So you have to deal with health department. You have to deal with the local government. You have to deal with certifications, and you have to deal with the fact that, oh, wait a minute, you exposed this person to this mental health counselor. What's their certifications? What's their background? Mm-hmm. What's their training? What's their level of expertise? So everything you have with your house, buy 100, and then add exponential factors into that. That's what you're running into with a domestic violence shelter. That's what a lot of people don't understand. It's like, oh, it's a DV shelter. Just give them money. They'll be up and running. No,
it's not even close. I mean, when we were budgeting back 20 years ago, we were looking at just one location, minimum $1 million a year, minimum. And if you take that shelter and now you have what's called cost per bed. Mm-hmm. Now you amortize out that cost per bed. What if you have a father show up with children with disabilities? Yep. I've got to assume medical costs. Well, sure, here in Atlanta we have the Children's Hospital. I can tap into them if I need to, but who's going to pay them? The money has to come from somewhere. It just doesn't auto-magically develop out of ether. Okay? That's what a lot of people don't understand. They go, well, 500 million is a lot of money, Bill. When you basically break it down and you go 500 million for a DV shelter for men in every capital city, in every state and 4 U.S. territories, that money's gone. In a heartbeat.
Gone. Now I'm back on the table asking these people that donated 500 million, we've got ongoing maintenance costs. Mm-hmm. We have got to pay for staff. What about linens? Someone's got to wash them. Somebody's got to care for them. We've got to have washers and dryers in there. There's going to be costs associated with this. A lot of people don't, because they've either not had the experience, or like me, have had the experience of running a business and starting businesses from scratch, to realize there's ongoing costs here that have to be amortized out over time. Mm-hmm. We have to develop schedule sheets. We have to develop CapEx and OpEx expenditures. That's got to be reported to the IRS. So now I have to pay attorneys and accountants. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on people are not really thinking about. But when you break it down and you explain to them, they go, oh, I didn't think about that. Right. That's why I do what I do. That's why I need help at what I do. Right. That's why we need money.
And to be clear, just so people understand, women's shelters deal with the same thing, right?
It's the same
this
thing.
Is not. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just saying.
And that's the beautiful thing about it is we just follow the model of the women's shelter.
Exactly.
I don't have to create no wheel. I just go, oh, what does the women's shelter do? They do this, we're going to do that. They do this, we're going to do that. They get their money from here, I'm going to go knock on their door.
And that's why, we're talking about this, because Bill and I both want people to understand the reality. You can't just say, I'm going to open a shelter and have one tomorrow. It takes time. More importantly than anything else, it takes money, because, you're trying to help people. The government needs to pay their share of it. But also, you're going to look for, and I'm sure you're doing this, corporate sponsors and all that. Corporations throw money at women's shelters. And as they should, by the way. But hello, if you say, I'm going to use Atlanta, Coca-Cola, okay, Hey, how much did you give to women's shelters last year? Okay, whatever the number is, how about you give us the same amount? Have
About
you
matching funds. It's called
matching?
matching
That's
funds.
all you want. Just give us the same amount. Don't take not one penny away from them.
But here's how they'll roll this out politically and make it a negative instance. They'll go, well, that's funds set aside for DV shelters. We'll have to take money out of theirs and split that with you.
Yep,
And
that's
now what does that cause? Conflict. Why do they want to cause conflict? Because they have to maintain an abuser has to maintain a victim. Now that puts us in direct conflict with them because it's about power and control, not about doing the good, conscionable, right thing.
mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing is they're creating conflict. And if the female domestic violence shelters would get together and say, you know what, he's right. We can be sued in abject poverty, and the IRS can actually file criminal charges against us for not adhering to our bylaws. Conscionably, and the right thing to do is to give them money from our 501, transmit it over to their 501. We do it.
Mm-hmm.
They can do that, but they won't. Why? Because it's about power and money. It's about abuse. Now, here's my challenge to the DV shelters out there. We're here. We're not going away. So you have a chance to do the right thing. Look at your finances and say, you know what? They're right. There's nothing wrong with fathers having a DV shelter. That's actually a good, wholesome, human thing to do. Let's get them money. Let's see who steps up. I bet you to be zero. Nobody will.
Oh, it's not a bet I'm going to make with you, Bill, because I already know the answer is going to be zero, right? Because I've actually tried that already many
No,
years ago.
they won't.
I,
They won't.
I remember back when we were fighting in New York to get the shelter. Now was the predominant organization fighting us, National Organization of Women, but they had all the shelter bigwigs backing them, and literally one of them testified in front of a committee in the New York State Legislature saying, well, our shelter's been open whatever the amount of time is. We have yet to see a single male victim come through our doors. And I went, what? So then, I kind of nudged him a little. And she flat out said, I have known zero documented cases of male victims. That's what they believe. And I threw out to them at that time going, all right, we all know there are male victims. Whatever number you want to come up with, fine. You're telling us you're not willing to help them. That's fine. But do you care about victims of domestic violence? Oh, yeah. Do you want to address the issue of domestic violence? Oh, yeah. Then why don't you want to help the male victims? Why are you so adamant and fighting against it? Maureen, who was the head of NOW at the time, looked me dead in the eye, and she didn't say a word because I had her. I said to her, why are you fighting this so hard? You claim you care about victims of domestic violence. You want to address the issue. We aren't taking one penny away from women's shelters. We're not asking for it. In fact, we're saying to the politicians, don't do that. To your point earlier, that's their
absolutely.
argument. And she looked me dead in the eye and turned around and walked away because she knew I had her, right? And it speaks to, it's the politicalization of it on their part. When you're talking with politicians now, this is something I want to kind of switch over because you're trying to get funding, and I can relate to what happened 20 years ago. I'm actually starting to work on it in North Carolina a little bit. I've had backdoor conversations with some, running into the same things that you talked about, right, as well. There's only so much in the budget. North Carolina's got a surplus budget of millions of dollars. Give me $500,000, I'll have a shelter open in Raleigh tomorrow. Well, it won't be that quick, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to worry about coming up with the money. You already have it. It's sitting in the bank. And we got to look at it, blah blah blah. When you're talking with politicians at any level now, what is their response to you? I'm curious to see what you have to
So
say.
my approach of politicians is a little different because 2024 is an election year.
Mm-hmm.
Every politician is looking for an edge, something that sets them apart from their competitors. And Daddy's house is that edge. Is that crystal clear? Is to essentially go, and because of the region of the country I'm in, I'm east of the Mississippi. Is to say in your campaigns, we support Daddy's house, the first domestic violence shelter east of the Mississippi, and I'm in support of that. Think about how beautiful that is. Is to not say I'm not going to support men and children, but actually to come out and say, I'm going to be the first I'm going to support this. And for me personally, it's going to be right here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look at everybody else out there making whatever campaign promises they're going to make, how does it really come back to the people, to families, to children? Where's the meat and potatoes? Where can you put your hands on that and hold it and go, yes, that money is not going to Ukraine. That money's not going to protect the border in Georgia. We don't have a border with Mexico. That money's coming back here to Georgia. That money's going to South Carolina. That money's going to Alabama. That money's going to Florida. That money's going to North and South Carolina. That money's going to Virginia. That money's going to Arkansas. That money's going to whatever state you want to put a daddy's house in. It doesn't have to be Georgia. If you're a politician running for office in North Carolina, you want a daddy's house in Raleigh? Put it in Raleigh. Nothing's stopping you. Give us the money at Veteran Fathers. We will put that house in Raleigh. If you're running for office here in Georgia, get the money in here. We'll put it right here in Georgia. You can get your photographs taken. We'll get a gold-plated shovel, and you'll be there at the ground-making ceremony. If you're really, really dedicated toward this and really want to set yourself aside in politics, let's get running on this. Let's get that house built to where you show up and you're doing a ribbon cutting.
Mm-hmm.
Think how powerful that is. You're doing something for people and children.
Children especially. And what Bill's talking about, I would say domestic violence is part of it, but the entire, whatever men's issue you care about, this is the approach that needs to be taken, right? The issue that men have had is we don't come together. We don't flex our muscles.
No,
because we're afraid to, right?
Absolutely.
And if we came together, this is a no-brainer. Getting a shelter open for men, there's really no negative to it anywhere.
There's no downside.
None.
It's all positive.
Literally
It's
none.
all positive.
So as men and women who support men, and there's a lot of them, this is where you need to go to every politician that's running in 2024. Trump, Biden, all the people running the primaries, all the way down to your local city council, mayor, any level, and say, what are you going to do to support us? Because
here's what you can say to them that'll rock them back on their heels. Ready for this? It's mind-blowing. It'll rock them back on their heels, definitely. Look at them and say, why aren't you supporting Daddy's house?
Mm-hmm.
It'll suck the air right out of whatever there's up there on stage too. And you want to know something that's coup de grace? Look at them and go, why don't you support Veteran Fathers?
That'll at federal level especially, that'll finish them.
Oh my God. Now, you're talking about the organization, but here's why it's a coup de grace. Here's what'll suck the wind out of their campaign is their staff is being paid to inform them of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're unaware of it, guess what's going to happen when they get off that stage or out of that, what do they call them, town hall meetings? They get out of town hall meetings, they're going to rip the face off their staff and go, why didn't you tell me? Why wasn't I informed? Find out about Veteran Fathers, find out about Daddy's house. I want a brief in 1 hour.
Oh, I will attest to everything Bill's saying because I talk to politicians all the time. I have talked with aides, God knows how much.
And all you have to do is ask the question.
Yeah, my contention, by the way, is the aides have more power than the actual politician because they drive what the politician knows. To speak to your point, one way you want to make an effect as one person, go to a town hall meeting. If you're in Iowa, they're all as we're filming this, tomorrow's the thing, right? Whatever state you're in, whatever primary state you're in, just hold up a sign. Will you support Daddy's house? That's it. You don't have to say a word. I guarantee you, some reporter is going to come over to you.
Oh, absolutely. And
what the hell is Daddy's house?
What's Daddy's house? Talk to us about this.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is look at him and go, I can't believe you don't know about Daddy's house.
That's
it. That's all you have to do is ask the question and keep asking the question over and over again. What do you mean you don't know about Daddy's house? How can you not know about Daddy's house? Don't you care?
Exactly.
Don't you care about children?
That's how you make a difference because people will say, I'm one person. You're right. But that's all you need to do. You hold that sign
Yeah.
up. You reach out to your politicians, and don't send an email.
Yeah.
Call,
So
pick up
here,
the phone and call
call them.
and say,
Here's how we're gonna help people out. So we're actually in the process now of designing a very specific tab to our website. It'll be labeled Daddy's House. When you go there, and I'll do a video whenever it's available, so you'll be well aware and you'll be well informed. You'll have our branding. Now, our branding is, and I posted a video on this. My daughter drew that. She didn't know she was drawing it for Daddy's House. I still got the original document I pulled it from. That's going to be the logo for Daddy's House. We're going to have flyers put up there in PDFs. So you'll have a full 8 by 10, and you'll have an 8 by 10 you can cut into two different flyers. We're designing those right now. So if you want to build that sign that says, "Do you support Daddy's House?" Get a hold of me. Hit me up at info@veteranfathers.com. Send me an email and say, "Can you send me your logo for Daddy's House?" I will send you the JPEG. I'll send you a PNG if you want it. And you will have that logo. You can print that out into the sign, make it as big as you want. Okay. Now, when we get the page up and running, it'll have flyers on there about Daddy's House. It'll have the logo on there about Daddy's House. You can download that, put that on signs, local. You can yard signs. You can stick them in the grass along your highways if you want. Support Daddy's House. Hashtag Daddy's House 501. You can find us anywhere on the web with that hashtag. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, X, YouTube. We use the same hashtag. I made that promise to you in a video. So we'll have the material available for you, because I know we're running into these primaries. So you can print it out, put it on a sign like Dan says, hold it up. You support Daddy's House, and have that logo there. And it'll blow them away,
oh,
because they
it'll,
won't know what it's about.
exactly. And that's the key, right? Is get them to come talk to you, because then the media is going to come to you. And for all the negative in the media, and there's a lot, okay, as someone who does media, okay, there are a lot out there that they're looking for the story, right? The story that's going to tug heartstrings, the one they're going to run at the end of the newscast, because they always want to end on a positive note, There's where your opportunity is. Well, what's Daddy's House? Well, it's this. Yeah. And by the way, here's my story. I'm a male victim of domestic violence. The reason I want Daddy's House is because I had nowhere to go. Some reporters will turn and walk away. A majority of them, because they care about one thing. It's not so much politics, believe it or not. It's money. Is this going to tug heartstrings and get people to click or watch? You better believe it's going to. So they will be interested.
So here's one other thing I'm going to ask of our listening audiences, and we both had different audiences, and we're both internationally exposed. Here's what I would like to ask. If you are a victim of domestic violence and you're a father or a man, I would like a short video clip of you, and you can send that to info@veteranfathers.com. And the short video clip is just this. And I'll do one as an example, and I'll put out a short video this week. And that is, "I'm a victim of domestic violence, and I had nowhere to go. We need Daddy's House." That's it. That's all you need to say. And I'll post a video on that, but get one, sit down in front of your smartphone, your mobile device, do a quick video. That's all you need to say. You don't need to say your name, don't need to say where you're from. You can be anywhere on the globe. You can be in India, Spain, Ireland, France, the UK, Brazil, Canada. It doesn't matter. That's all I need. And I will put together a montage of you saying that in Daddy's House videos, because these videos need to go all over the globe.
And to just address that point quickly, because I agree 100% with what you're doing there, Bill, is for those of you that are in the UK, because I have a lot of UK listeners, or Australia, New Zealand, India, South America, all of them, even though we're talking primarily US, everything we're talking about affects you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
This paradigm that's in the US exists globally, and it came from the US. So if we start changing the U.S., the U.K. will change in a matter of months behind the U.S. And then it'll start cascading, because, I don't want to get too far into it, but what's happening in India right now is, oh my God. I'm going to be doing a podcast on it not too distant future, because they are literally criminalizing being a male.
Oh, absolutely. It's 100%
Oh my
criminal
God.
for you to be born a male.
I mean,
I mean,
we're not being
no.
hyperbolic here. I can't say it because my passion's coming up. I mean, they are literally going to jail you if you're born male. I mean, that's what
Yes.
it's not an exaggeration. It's happening.
No, we're
So,
not making this up.
yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
it's scary.
I use this term often, and I kind of coined the term. This is a global pandemic.
It
And
absolutely is.
steal Aaron Pizzi statement is it's male genocide.
It,
And to think other men are contributing to this, and that's why I keep trying to explain to people, it doesn't impact them. Why? Because they're part of the governing or power elite.
mm-hmm.
They're wealthy enough or they're high enough established in government where they can isolate themselves from it. But who does it impact? The common Joe,
The
the
average
common
person.
man,
Yep.
the average person.
Yep.
But the thing is, we outnumber them. We haven't organized. We haven't gotten together.
And they count on our division to prevent
They
that.
keep us divided all the time. And
Which
unless men get organized, we will continue to take it up the rump. That's the only. We have to get
Absolutely.
organized.
And that's the other point I'll make based on what you were just saying, kind of popped in my brain, is that when you hear discussions of domestic violence, people, oh, men are so, but no, you need to stand up and speak up. Bill does it. I do it. And yes, you're going to catch hell. I mean, this past weekend, I called a couple out. They're still slamming me. I don't care. Because you know what? For every person that's slamming me, there's 10 others going, holy crap, I didn't know. Right?
See, that's why we chose this is our new mascot here in the background. That's a honey badger.
Yeah, lean to your left, Bill, and then Bill will see it. There it is. So there it is. I love that, by the way. I love when you send it to me.
There it is. That's our mascot. His name's Badger on Vanguard. He's a honey badger. Why honey badger? We don't give a fuck.
Well, they're the most vicious animal there is.
We don't care.
Yeah.
And look at all the videos. I love the honey badger. He just doesn't care. He eats snakes, turtles, bugs. He attacks lions and tigers. He just doesn't care.
He's fearless.
He's crazy like that.
Yeah.
That's where Dan and I are at. It's like,
we have to be, because
we have to be.
Somebody said to me this past weekend, and it was a feminist, and she sent me a DM. She didn't do it publicly, and I'll give her credit for that. She's like, why are you doing it the way you're doing it? Why don't you, I'm paraphrasing here, but why don't you play nice? And I said to her, it's what we've done for 50 years.
Yes. Doesn't work.
And nothing has changed. In fact, it's gotten worse and worse. It's not that we don't hate women. We don't want to take anything away from women's shelters or any woman's rights or any of that.
We've never said that.
We're fighting for equality. That's it.
That's all we want.
So if you and I said this to her, she hasn't replied, by the way. If you truly care about equality, you'd be standing next to me, not fighting me. Of course, she hasn't replied to that.
Right, and that's why I often come back and I say this a lot is pick a side of the table if you can. I'll pick one for you, and you're not going to like what I pick, and that is because you're abusive. You're an intentionally abusive individual, and I guarantee you, if you look at your life, you're not only abusive in your comments, statements, and lack of support for men, but you've also been abusive in your relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
It's only when you start looking at the finer details of who says those mean, awful, horrific, intentionally abusive things about men and lack of support for men and don't understand the plight men go through globally. That's when you realize you're dealing with an abusive person. That person is intentionally malicious and intentionally abusive. You have to understand, we as men need to draw lines in the sand and put them on one side of the line or the other.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way this will get fixed. Either they're abusive or they're not. There's no in between anymore.
And by the way, that's the same argument the feminists made and have made, is that we need to hold people accountable. That's what we're saying. Shocking, isn't it?
Shocking.
Bill, we only got a couple minutes. How can people support Daddy's House and help you get it open?
So there's a variety of ways. I've already discussed about you can make those video shorts. I'll do a follow-up video later on this week and put that out. You can do those video shorts. The second way is obviously you can do personal donations. We've got the Give Butter site we'd rather you contribute to. If not, you can go to my link tree. Dan will post that at the end of the video. Mm-hmm. You can go to the link tree. They're all on the link tree for everything going over to Daddy's House. The other way too is let's just say, like most fathers that have gone through family court, you're just financially destitute, but you know somebody. You can make an introduction and say, "Hey, look, go over here, talk to this. You need to get me on the phone with them. Go look at what Daddy's House wants to do. Get the message out there." Okay. Now, how do you break the algorithms in social media? You have to do three things. You have to like, you have to share, and you have to comment. And what type of comment? It can be a simple emoji. You can do a simple smile, simple thumbs up, but you're making a comment that shatters the algorithms. That makes it go to a higher level. And why share? Because I have people that follow me and you have people that follow you. Sometimes they're not the same. You're sharing it. That breaks that algorithm. It makes a leap into a different architecture as
Mm-hmm.
well. But you can also tag your politicians locally. There's no reason you can't have a daddy's house in your state, in your capital. I'm focusing on Atlanta because it gives a starting point. You can have them in whatever state you're in whatever U.S. territory you're in. You can have them in your own country. But how do you get it all centralized? Bring them back to daddy's house. How do you do that? You do a share and you tag them in the share. If you're on TikTok, you can share it amongst your friends, share it to a politician that's on TikTok. Vibex, everybody I think's running for office is on TikTok. Everybody's on
Yeah,
X,
they
share
are.
it with them. That's how you do this. That's how you help. Just do a simple like, you're not helping. You're not doing nothing. You're being lazy. There's no reason to be lazy. We've been lazy and complacent for too long. As men, you see one of your brothers out there, he just liked, tag him on the side, hit him up in DM and say, "Why did you just like that? You need to like it, share, and make a comment."
Mm-hmm.
Do that. Hold them accountable. Guys, we need to stop being lazy. We're getting beat up because we're lazy. That's why. A firm believer in that.
Oh,
Stop
it's
being lazy. And if you think about it time wise, 2 seconds. Like, comment, and share. 15 seconds at the most. And you can go on with the rest of your day.
I
That's
mean,
it.
if you're this far into watching this video right now, go down in the comments and just put a thumbs up. That's all you need to
That's
do.
it.
That's
Just put
it.
it, just like, thumbs up.
Because
Now,
it'll drive that algorithm and get this out to more people to educate them and hopefully get them to do the same and so on. What Bill's talking about is exactly what we need to do. And it doesn't cost a dime. And you
doesn't cost
said two
anything. Doesn't cost you a
seconds,
dime.
it's 2/10 of a second.
Now here's the complaint. Yeah, I can see this one coming already, and I've already addressed this. Well, I'm not going to like, comment, share every one of his videos or every one of his comments. You don't have to. Follow the hashtag. It's hashtag Daddy's House GA for Georgia 501 or hashtag Daddy's House 501. You can search those hashtags. You find one, you didn't make a like, comment, and share, do it. I'm making it so easy. What am I doing? I'm taking away your excuses.
And that's what we're trying to do with this whole podcast is to take those excuses away. Yeah, guys, if you take nothing else away from this, this is the most important thing. Do something. I don't care.
Something.
If you can give $1, $1. If you've watched this far, I'm challenging you. I'll put the links down below. Go to the site and give them $1. If 50,000 people watch this, $1 is 50 grand. They can do a lot of good with that, right?
There's a lot. I mean, there's 7.5 million single fathers in the United
Yes.
States. If every father that's single gave $1, we've blown our goal away. But here's the bigger message. Now the politicians have to pay attention. Guess why? That's 7.5 million
Yes.
people who's paying attention to Daddy's House. You don't think every single politician is going to pay attention to that and go, have a oh fuck moment?
Exactly.
They're going to go, oh damn, we missed this one. We
Yep.
need to get in touch with these guys. That will turn veteran fathers into a political powerhouse inside of 90 days, guaranteed. You want political power on the Capitol Hill? That's how you do it. 7.5 million
Exactly
fathers
right.
donate $1. That's it.
And if you think it won't work, I got 3 words for you. National Organization of Women. Because that's exactly what they did in the 70s. We're not inventing anything.
No,
We're
not
just doing what they
recreating the wheel.
did. And to their
We're not
credit.
we spent 10,000 hours researching this. Legitimately, actually over 10,000 hours researching this. Took us 5 years, but we did it. And that's what we're doing. We're following their model. They built the wheel. We're just saying, we like your wheel. We're going to implement it here.
Yeah.
So if they complain, oh, you shouldn't do that. Oh, you know what they're complaining about? The fact they did it.
That we're copying them. I hear that
We're
all the
just
time.
copying them.
They hate it when you
I'm,
point that back out to them, by the
yeah,
way.
I'm like, we're
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 just doing
doing
what
what
you
you
did.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just
So,
doing what you did.
all right, Bill, we got to wrap things up. One final thought to share with the audience. I know we just threw a lot at them, but one final thought.
One final thought is this, and that is men are suffering. And when men suffer, their children suffer. It's generational.
Mm-hmm.
We have to break the generational flow of abuse. Now, it's generational whether you had a generation of being victims or a generation of being an abuser. But our children deserve better. They deserve better from men, and they deserve better from women. There's no reason men can't have these DV shelters. None at all. Stop being abusive and start being a human being. And let's take care of our kids.
Amen to that, brother. So I want to personally thank you for coming on again. By the
It's
way,
always a
Bill was
pleasure.
on a few months ago. I'll put a link to that show. You got to go check that show out too. We talked about a whole bunch of different stuff then. But I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come on and talk about the issue. As you know, my goal, just like yours, is to raise awareness and try and get men, especially the younger guys. We're two OGs. White OGs, as we talked about earlier, but we both have the same goal, which is ultimately to help everyone. It's not just men that we're helping.
No,
it's women. Women benefit too. Children, as you've mentioned. The more that we talk, the more that we put ourselves out there. Gentlemen, let me be very clear to you. Do I catch hell? Does Bill catch hell? Yes, we do. But you know what? 10 times support comes back than any hell we catch. It's
yeah.
When I look at I get thousands of DMs a day. It is roughly 10 to 1. It's probably more like 100 to 1 if I actually counted it. Positive, thank you. I wish there was more. And you have to take action, gentlemen. Stand up and speak up. Share your story. Yes, you might get a negative comment if you do. Somebody might slam you. I will admit that. But you know what? You're going to get far, far more support and acknowledgement. And the more of us that do it, the more that step in and support Bill and his organization, the better. Go ahead, Bill.
No, that's what I was going to say is think of the mascot. Think of Badgeron. Is you got to have that honey badger attitude. And that's a very important thing you just brought up, Dan, is you have to stand up. You have to speak up. Dan and I can't do it alone. We can't always jump into these conversations by ourselves. I mean, we have lives we lead as well. So as a man, educate yourself. Get involved, get engaged in these conversations, have those difficult conversations. Yeah, you're going to take some spears. Yeah, you're going to take some shots. Life's not over. Life goes on. You're going to get up in the morning and do it again.
And again, and again, and again.
And again.
And I've said this before.
But you have got to get in the fight.
That's exact. The more of us that get in the fight, strengthen numbers. And that's the bottom line. So, Bill, again, thank you for coming on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up and say, powerful show, guys and girls. If you did like it, as we just talked about a couple minutes ago, give me that thumbs up. Give me that like. Give me that share. Comment below. Comment, share your stories, whatever it is you want to share. It is about, as Bill mentioned, it's about driving the algorithm. I don't hide that fact, right? I'm trying to get these issues brought to the attention of those that can do something about it. And that includes you and me. The more we speak up, the more action we take, the sooner things will change. The mistake men have made is we've been complacent. It's time to stand up and speak up. And even if it's something as simple as giving me that thumbs up, subscribe to this channel. I put a new podcast out every Sunday on various issues that men and boys face. I do this to help you. All I'm asking is help me back. Just give me that like, subscribe, and thumbs up. And stand up and fight for yourselves, because you know what? In the end, you matter. And if nothing else you take from this is understand you matter. Every man matters. Every bit as much as any woman does and any child does. We're all the same. We're human beings. And I truly believe that. And that's all Bill and I want for anyone. All right, we're going to close it out on that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.